Tower, Cessna 4432 uniform.
That's a 3-4 Bravo, straight out departure approved. Traffic, an FAA flight check DC-3, started inbound 90 miles now on a back course ASR approach.
3-4 Bravo, thank you. San Jose Tower, Cessna 32 uniform on 20.7.
With the 3-2 uniform, San Jose Tower.
Cessna 3-2 uniform coming up. Landing San Jose.
With the 3-2 uniform, San Jose Tower, fairground, straight in approach.
This building is the culmination of 60 years of flight in Santa Clara County, the new terminal at San Jose's Municipal Airport. It's not finished yet, but the architect's statement has already been made. There in the tall columns that front a wall of glass, flowing upward into graceful arches that support a rippling roofline. It's a beautiful building, and more than that. It's a commitment to the future of aviation in this valley, and a monument to the aviation history that was made here. The cornerstone of this building was actually laid 25 years ago, when the people of San Jose voted a 10-cent tax increase to finance an airport. But getting that airport was a long uphill struggle. The 1940 tax increase election was a close one, followed by 4 years of World War that shoved everything else into a back seat. But airport land was acquired in bits and pieces, a little every year, and by the end of the war, nearly 500 acres had been put together, part of which was leased to a private operator. In the latter part of 1948, the city finally took over and was at last in the municipal airport business. In January of 1949, the first commercial air carrier began making regularly scheduled stops at San Jose, and it became more than just an airport in name only. The new facility needed room to grow, room that could be gained only by closing a road and rerouting a river. Unfortunately, the road, Brokaw Road, belonged to someone else, the city of Santa Clara, and Santa Clara was intent on keeping it. The early 50s saw some fierce intercity combat before a land swap gave San Jose the room it needed for its runways. City engineers rerouted the Guadalupe River, and in 1960, the main runway was extended across Brokaw Road. It is now 7,800 feet long. Airport growth has been phenomenal. In 1949, the airport had a gross revenue of only $6,000. This fiscal year, airport revenue will break the $1 million mark for the first time. It is home to more than 400 private aircraft, used for both business and pleasure. Last year, there were 271,000 landings or takeoffs recorded, making San Jose Municipal the 14th busiest airport in the nation. In terms of itinerant traffic, it is 10th. Commercial air carriers handled 124,000 passengers at San Jose last year. All this activity has called for a total investment in the airport of $9 million so far. But there is more to come. The future will see San Jose Municipal become a major airport, servicing a number of major carriers. The new terminal is the symbol of that future, and the difference it will make can be shown by comparing the new terminal to the one it will replace. This squat, ugly structure was designated as temporary when it was built, and it's been in temporary use for 15 years. But neither San Jose's involvement in aviation nor the involvement of the county as a whole is limited to the development of the airport. Santa Clara County and the phenomenon of flight go back a long way together, all the way back to the beginning. That beginning was here, on this quiet spot on the campus of the University of Santa Clara. On the morning of April 29th, 1905, an event took place here that was to put this county on the aerial map. A man named Montgomery put a fragile tandem-winged glider into the air and demonstrated that man could fully control the ungainly kites they called aeroplanes in those days. John J. Montgomery's claim to fame dates back even farther than that April day in Santa Clara 60 years ago, back 22 years to 1883, and this grassy slope near San Diego called Otay Mesa. It was here the young Montgomery was credited with making the first successful, fully controlled flight and safe landing in a heavier-than-air craft. Years before the Wrights and the Curtises and the others better remembered by history would venture aloft in their awkward but motor-driven machines. By 1905, Montgomery had perfected his craft, and on the day this picture was taken, he was showing it to the public for the first time. He was a part-time instructor at the university and chose to make his flight from the campus. His glider was named the Santa Clara and was painted red and white, the school colors. His pilot was Danny Maloney, a young Irish daredevil whom Montgomery had found making parachute jumps from balloons over Santa Cruz to thrill the summer tourists. While the crowd of more than 1,000 people gathered, a huge balloon slowly filled with hot air. The balloon would lift Maloney and the glider into the air, where Maloney would cut loose and maneuver back to Earth to land on a pre-designated spot. Maloney sat astride a narrow board in the 24-foot glider and with hand grips pulled piano wire through a system of pulleys and connections to operate the control surfaces. The two curved wings were covered with a thin muslin, and the whole craft weighed only 45 pounds. He rose to a height of 4,000 feet that day before cutting loose from the balloon, and soared and executed aerobatic maneuvers for 20 minutes before landing. The crowd was ecstatic, and the San Francisco newspapers gave the event page one space, calling the flight graceful and bird-like. The next demonstration was a month later, and posters like this one were scattered all around the Santa Clara Valley to drum up excitement. The flight was from the old agricultural park at the corner of Ray Street and the Alameda in San Jose. The same procedure was followed. A balloon was filled with hot air, the glider was suspended from the balloon and carried aloft. The pilot cut loose and flew the glider in large, lazy circles above the amazed crowd. Six years later, Montgomery had a new kind of glider and a new place to experiment. In the Evergreen area south of San Jose, along San Felipe Road, a monument stands beside the road. It was over the surrounding hills that Montgomery made his famous flights in 1911. In October of that year, he made camp on the old Ramonda Ranch and for 2 weeks conducted a series of flights in his new monoplane, which he called the Evergreen. The new glider had a fuselage, a single wing, a place for the pilot to sit, and a control yoke, the forerunner of the control wheel used in aircraft today. Those 2 weeks were important ones for Montgomery. His experiments went very well, and he made 55 successful flights. He launched the glider by running it down a length of wooden track, becoming airborne when he reached sufficient speed. Just before they were to break camp, Montgomery decided to try one more flight. His chief mechanic, Cornelius Reinhardt, asked permission to file down some stove bolts that protruded from the fuselage above the pilot's head. Montgomery ignored the request and made that one last flight. On takeoff, the glider fell into a sideslip and crashed from an altitude of 20 feet. It was not a serious crash, and Montgomery should have walked away from it. But he didn't. A protruding stove bolt penetrated behind one ear and into his brain. As Reinhardt said, but for 45 cents worth of stove bolts, Montgomery could have lived to see the airplane become what it is today. But he did leave a rich legacy to aviation. He is credited with developing the 4 basic elements of controlled flight: the curved wing, the aileron, rudder, and stabilizer. These were essential to the flight of his glider in 1911, as they are essential to the flight of this B-52 today. Aviation stands in Montgomery's debt, but unfortunately, it's a debt that aviation has been slow to recognize. It was only through the efforts of his friends that the bamboo frame of one of his early gliders was hung in an out-of-the-way spot in a dim corridor of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. The man who died in Evergreen has yet to receive his due. Other men were making famous flights then, and Santa Clara County had other air pioneers. One was a San Jose man, Robert G. Fowler, who in 1911, the year Montgomery died, made the first transcontinental flight across the United States from west to east. It took him 4 months to make it. That feat, along with others like the first motion pictures taken in flight and the first non-stop crossing of the Isthmus of Panama, are commemorated on this plaque in Fowler's honor, which hangs in the terminal building at San Jose Municipal Airport. Following the First World War, during the 20s and 30s, flying was a fad, a curiosity, a thrill for sensation seekers. There were few serious applications for the airplane, which the public continued to regard as something of an aerial plaything. One exception was the innovation of airmail. The first airmail pickup in San Jose was made in 1920. San Jose postmaster Byron Millard handed a sack of mail to San Francisco postmaster Charles Fay for aerial delivery to that city. The 50-mile flight took 28 minutes. But for the most part, man's new mastery of the air remained a novelty. The public was just getting used to the automobile, and the airplane was still a generation away from becoming an integral part of daily life. It was the era of the barnstormer. The airplane was a great act, and air shows and air races drew people by the thousands. Those who flew were considered daredevils, as indeed they were. Flying was a challenge, and the Society of Airmen was small, close-knit, and select. Those who broke the barriers of speed, height, and distance became international heroes on a scale never known before or since. The aircraft industry was taking its first feeble steps toward becoming the mammoth it is today, and it was still dependent upon the cabinet maker's art. The fabric-covered, wooden-framed aeroplanes were sturdy, though. Many of the planes that were flying over the Santa Clara Valley 30 years ago are still flying over it today. But there were more places to land when those planes were new. The Santa Clara Valley at one time or another has been home to nearly a dozen small, privately operated airports. On North 1st and Rosa Streets in San Jose, just across Highway 17 from the Municipal Airport, the City Hall complex occupies land that during the early 20s was a small airport out north of town. The old San Jose Airport is now better known as Tropicana Village. In 1926, King Road was in the country, and a thriving airport was located on King between Cunningham and Story Road. Today, all evidence of the airport is buried beneath these rows of houses. On Bayshore Highway in East San Jose, the California Cheese Company sits where the hangar of the Garden City Airport used to. Bayshore itself runs right down the center of the old runway. These airports and the others like them fell victim to growth. Santa Clara County's new population needed room, and airports became too valuable as real estate property. Increased taxes also hastened their demise. But they kept aviation alive during its adolescence. In the early years in Santa Clara County and elsewhere, the young industry was sustained and developed by the private operator, the man who ran the airfield and the one who flew a plane. Flying was more than just a hobby or a pastime. It was a sacred trust, and those who were associated with aviation during the years between wars were determined to draw attention to the potential of the airplane and to interest the public in flying.
It was a matter of attraction and getting people interested in flying. This is the way to do it.
There was a lot of barnstorming.
To attract people into the industry. It isn't like going out and selling a pair of shoes, you know, like down on First Street or someplace where there's always a new customer. We had to go out and get the customers, and this is one way to get them out the field and get them interested in flying. And, of course, the type of people that went into flying in those days were the person that was the daredevil type, I guess they might say. But and it was the thrill of it and the art of it and the whole work that went with it.
Some of these men are still flying in Santa Clara County, and when they get together around a vintage aircraft, they talk about the early days. Cecil Reed learned to fly in 1930 and has been associated with 2 local airports, one of which bears his family's name. His brother, Bob Reed, learned to fly the same year and still lives on property that was once his Garden City Airport. Harold Bosshart has been flying in this valley since 1929 and was the man who selected the site for Reed's Hillview Airport in East San Jose.
I think that the restrictions are getting worse today than they were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we could get into an airplane and go up and do as we please. Today, you go up and do it, and you lay in for a $500 fine. What do you think? Well, I think that things have changed. I think man's skill in those days was judged by his aerobatic ability, and to be able to do it properly and to be able to come out of it all right without getting into trouble. And this is the basic reason at that time that man would go out and do these things and do these aerobatic stunts and carry on that way. And I think that's made a good pilot, but we lost a lot of them, too, along the way. But today, a man flying an airplane is meet FAA regulations. He has to be able to fly with a radio and to be able to come into control zones and to be able to land an airplane and go cross-country safely without getting into weather conditions and be able to go through them and get out all right. I think this is how much it's changed in our time, Harold.
Well, during the last 2 years, why, the airplane has become more popular, too, and we've had more airplanes around to take care of. And they had to have more restrictions because of the traffic, and it was necessary, and, of course, they're getting a little strenuous on some of the restrictions now. some of the people that fly old antique airplanes will maybe have to put radios in them to get into some of these airports. They will not be able to negotiate around in traffic without them.
Another thing is that in the aerobatic days of flying, aerobatics was an art. It was not flying, it was the art of flying. Today, it is it's getting so commercial, it's pitiful. Everything is a cross-country flight to here and nothing over a 45-degree back. There's no art to flying anymore at all. There's no cross-control flying anymore. The late model pilot has lost all art of flying.
I would say back in the old days around 1930s, 29s, when we had the old Alum Rock Airport over there, you remember, Harold?
Oh, sure do.
It was quite a place, and there was a lot of activity in the area. We always had a lot of good dances and a lot of good parties. And this was part of flying. We did a lot of hangar flying, as you know. We used to work about 8 or 10 hours on the airplane to get 1 hour of flying out of it. You know how we had to do. Had to overhaul it before we took off a lot of times. We had engines that were water-cooled, remember?
Sure.
And we had the magneto single ignition, and this was always a possibility of the mag going out of the points or something, and with water-cooled, we could even lose the water, you remember. And we'd do that once in a while. We'd have a steam boiler in the air. You know, we'd run out of water, and then the airplane would start steaming up, and, of course, that was a forced landing.
It took painstaking and loving care to keep these old birds in the air, to keep the struts tight, the fabric patched, and the engine running. But that kind of care pays dividends in longevity, and these planes are still flying. In fact, Santa Clara County can claim more antique aircraft than any other place in the world, and many of them are kept at Reed's Hillview and are often on display on weekends. The planes are in great demand for air shows and fly-ins all around the country, and keeping them in shape is a demanding hobby for their owners. Most residents of Santa Clara County don't realize they have a flying museum right at their elbow. And some of the planes are a one-of-a-kind aircraft, like this 1927 Waco biplane. What makes it unusual, besides its spotless, like-new condition, is its engine, which is a Curtiss V8 model from 1916 and World War I. It features a radiator up under the top wing, which keeps the engine water-cooled. An RNF Waco, vintage 1930. A Fleet, Model 2, made in 1929. A Fairchild, PT-19. This model trained a lot of military pilots, as did the Ryan, PT series. Then there's the do-it-yourself airplane, a Mannix Capon from 1938. And the Kreider-Reisner biplane, made in 1929, which has been in the Reed family for more than 30 years. This 1930 Perth Amboy Bird, BK, is one of the slowest, steadiest aircraft to ever fly. It can become airborne at 18 miles per hour. To their owners, these antique aircraft are a joy and a pleasure to fly. And to the rest of the community, they offer a rare opportunity to see aviation history in action. And looking up from your backyard some Sunday afternoon, to see one of them in flight is like looking up into the sky over the Santa Clara Valley 30 years ago. As surely as the antique airplanes are our link to the aviation's past in Santa Clara County, The new terminal is our bridge to its future. The terminal building and the control tower remodeling are being accomplished by a bond issue approved by the voters. The same kind of public support that gave the airport its start a generation ago. The project cost totals $1.5 million. And when it's done, the airport will be ready for the next phase in its expansion. Terminal facilities will be on a par with San Jose's rating as one of the busiest airports in the nation. The upper floor will be devoted to making pleasant the waiting that is a part of air travel. There will be a restaurant, coffee shop, and cocktail lounge complex. Downstairs will be the passenger services. 100 feet of counter space, enough for 5 airline ticket agencies. There will be car rental facilities, a barber shop, a gift shop and newsstand, a nursery for the youngsters, and administrative offices. The striking roof line that distinguishes the exterior is seen again inside, rippling across the top of the high-ceilinged interior. Not only does the terminal make the airport more attractive, it also makes it more desirable to commercial air carriers. Pacific Airlines is the only one serving San Jose now, but Pacific Southwest Airways has a deposit on counter space in the new terminal. PSA has been using Municipal as an alternate field for some time, and United Airlines received permission to do so 2 years ago. But now, Western Airlines has applied for permission, and American Airlines is reportedly thinking about it also. The future of the airport looks good, especially to the man who's been the airport manager since its beginning, Jim Nissen.
The completion of the terminal building marks the third major milestone in the development of the airport. The first one was the acquiring of all the land that we needed to the master plan, and secondly was the lengthening of the runways, which gives us the capability of handling jet aircraft, and now the third, the completion of the terminal building. The building is a very beautiful building. I think it's the most beautiful public building that we have in San Jose. It is a very functional building. I think the people of San Jose should be congratulated for their foresight in providing the funds and capability for building this building. With the completion of it now, the city is embarking on an aggressive program for securing additional air carrier service to San Jose. We now have a beautiful gateway to the air age, and I'm sure as the area grows, we know we will have the additional service as they grow and can support it. And I wish to invite all of the people San Jose, who built and own this building, to come out and see it. We will have the dedication of the building. We want to invite you to come and see it, and of course, we want to invite you to use our services facilities from the building.